Hey everybody, Jarek here. Do you remember this? This was 10 years ago. This was the trailer for the original Black Mesa Source mod. Yeah, they didn't reach that release date. The mod came out 3 years later in 2012, and then another 3 years later came the retail release, which had polished up animations, graphics, a newer version of the source engine, and was definitely worth the money I spent on the original game. But the asterisk next to the release of both the mod and the final retail release was that it didn't have Xen, the final portion of the original Half-Life. Now, I never got the impression that we weren't going to get Xen, but eventually I came to the conclusion of I'll believe it when I see it. And suddenly, without much warning, the final build of Xen dropped onto us a few days ago. It's done. You can play Black Mesa from start to end, and that's crazy. This project has been in development for around 15 years. I'm 28 years old, that's half of my lifetime. It's been almost special to see the Black Mesa team go from just a bunch of modders that wanted to recreate a game they loved to a full studio called Crowbar Collective that can release a full AAA style game. Yeah, Xen is beautiful. At any given moment, unless you're inside, when you look up at the sky, something like this is what you were going to see. And that structure in the middle of your screen? You will see that structure throughout almost the entirety of Xen. Always in the distance, ever foreboding. That structure is the end of the game. It's like having the Eye of Sauron constantly watching you. And that's just the skybox, let alone Xen itself. I was genuinely curious to see how Crowbar Collective would deal with Xen. Xen is not really remembered fondly amongst most people. It was a few tedious sections at the end of Half-Life 1, according to majority of fans. I actually don't agree with that. I do agree that some of the platforming sections were annoying, but I do think people exaggerate how bad Xen was. And they certainly forget that it has some of the most memorable sections in the entire game. Gonarch's Lair is a great example. But with that said, Xen did still feel somewhat rushed, and there was a lot you could have done with Xen. So I was curious how they were going to change Xen to become its own fully realized world. I expected a lot of things, but I didn't expect a tropical rainforest in space. I know I've said it before, but this game is beautiful. I had a few comparisons immediately when I started playing this. The first one was to Avatar, but I quickly scrapped that, and then came up with a weirder comparison that seems odd at first, but makes more sense when you play the game. Ori and the Blind Forest. That's some extremely high praise because the best thing about Ori is its art direction, its music, and how immersive it is. Black Mesa checks off all of these. Its art direction is amazing. Graphically, it just looks good to look at. The ambience in the background fits in naturally. All the sound effects make this feel like an actual world that could exist. None of this existed with the original Xen. The original Xen didn't make me think that animals could somehow live here, it just seemed like some rocks flying in space for platforming puzzles. Black Mesa Xen, on the other hand, has water, plenty of creatures, plant life. This does seem like a real place. But it goes even farther than that because this is not the only thing you're seeing. You are going to see numerous different types of environments as you play throughout the game. You'll see forests, canyons, lakes, rivers, up to alien factories. The original Half-Life Xen just kind of looked the same all the way through, and that's not the case with Black Mesa Xen. This game will constantly keep your attention visually. The only real downside of this is that this game does seem to have some frame rate issues. And my computer is not... No, it's not a dick. I got so many comments in the last thing. Look at this. This is art I commissioned years ago. You guys need to get your eyes... Yeah, the game chugs in some sections, and this isn't really a surprise. They did tell us that they're working on optimization. This is technically still in beta. That's what happened whenever something else in Black Mesa went into beta. It had some frame rate issues and it was ultimately fixed, so I'm not really worried about this. In fact, if you're watching this video 6 months to a year from now, it's probably already been fixed and runs perfectly fine. But just note, again, this is technically in beta, so some things are going to change, but all the content is there and you can play it from start to end. Graphically, I have nothing negative to say. Its art direction is amazing. The music blends in perfectly with what's going on around you. It looks distinct in each section to keep your mind invested into what's going on. This is a good looking game. Those years of work really paid off. So it's eye candy, but what's more important is the gameplay, and thankfully it doesn't disappoint here either. For the most part. Now again, like I said, I didn't hate the original Xen, but I always had the feeling that they could have done so much more. All of the puzzles in Xen felt really shallow. It felt rushed, almost like they just wanted to finish the game. Here's a good example. This section in the original Half-Life Xen. You have to do this to open up a portal, but all you're really doing here is smacking open something and then pressing E on 3 different things in one room, and then you can walk through the portal. It's hardly a puzzle at all. In Black Mesa's version, this is an actual puzzle. You still have to turn on 3 sources of power, but each room is a puzzle in itself. This was common map design amongst Valve when it comes to Half-Life 1. Another good example of this is Blast Pit. You walk into a room, Valve very explicitly shows you your roadblock, a giant tentacle in the way that can instantly kill you, and this room is multiple stories of different branching pathways that you have to go down to turn something on or do something to eventually come back to clear this roadblock. The maps themselves weren't so complicated that they became mazes, but they also weren't just linear hallways, which is one of my biggest disappointments with Half-Life 2, and I felt that Half-Life 1 was better. Half-Life 2 didn't really do any of this, but in Half-Life 1 it's all over. Anyway, back on point, the Black Mesa developers added this into many different sections of Xen, which is how I felt that Xen should have been to begin with. So the map design is fantastic and really fits in with the rest of Half-Life 1. As for the enemies, you were mostly going to be fighting aliens, which is not a surprise, you're in space. You were not going to be fighting any Marines here. To spice things up, they added some new enemies. Like, for example, a few new Houndai types. They added an explosive Houndai. These actually don't do too much damage to you, but can launch you off cliffs, so be careful. They added an Alpha Houndai, which is a tankier version of an original Houndai. And another example is that they added a water version of a Barnacle, which is even worse than a Barnacle in my mind. Not from a gameplay perspective, that's fine, but this seems terrifying. Something is going to grab you down and not only bite you to death, but also drown you. Yeah, I'm not interested in that, but that's also fantastic for an alien world where everything wants to kill you. The last enemy I want to talk about is the controllers, and these things were a pain in the ass in Half-Life 1. Especially if you ended up running out of revolver ammo, you didn't have much that could actually deal with them. I mean, how many flying enemies don't end up being really annoying, especially in mass numbers in video games? Not many. These things were awful to fight. In Black Mesa though, they've been changed quite a bit. They still fly around you and they still shoot those projectiles at you, but they're pretty easy to dodge, and you do get warning when they're flying in. It's impossible to not hear their cry. But before I talk about the main twist of the controllers, I need to talk about the Vortigaunts. I really like what they did to the Vortigaunts in Xen. The Vortigaunts in Xen are not hostile to you. They're just slaves. They're workers. They don't want to be here any more than you do. The first time you see them getting beaten up by the grunts. By all means, they want to help you. They don't like their situation. But they're also cowering because they have no control. You get to see Vortigaunts' living quarters. They're not very good, and you actually sympathize with them. This is some District 9 level shit. I love being able to see more lore that's already been established in the Half-Life franchise. Xen didn't do this very well. You saw the workers, but that was really it. You didn't see much more, and there was so much more they could have done. So this is lore that already existed, but Black Mesa is just expanding on it, and it doesn't ruin any of the lore. It all fits in. Anyway, back to the controllers. Since Vortigaunts are friendly, they're not usually going to attack you, except when the controllers control the Vortigaunts, making their name make more sense. You can tell when this is happening. An orange strand goes from the controller to the Vortigaunt and they start attacking you. You do have warning. This is really cool in concept and execution. I don't mind this at all. The only thing about the controllers that does annoy me is that they have an extra ability of just picking up objects and throwing them at you, which can be really annoying when you have 10 controllers all floating around you and one of them picks up an explosive barrel. I'm somehow supposed to see this and then it insta-kills me. You can shoot the explosive barrel out of the air, but again, I have so much happening around me that I probably won't even notice. So that can be annoying, and it's extra obnoxious in one specific part of Xen. It's not all positive. I do have some critiques. Let's start soft, Gonarch's Lair I'm not a big fan of compared to the original Half-Life 1. Objectively, it's fine. It does exactly what it's supposed to. It's playtested perfectly well, didn't seem too difficult, and there really doesn't seem to be any major issues. Aside from when the Gonarch randomly stun-locks you occasionally, but whatever, that's not very common. Now the problem I have with it is just how they did this. It's a chase sequence. The original one was just a fight with a giant one-testicled spider. Now you're spending most of it running away. This adds a little bit of confusion the first time you play the game, because at first you just shoot it a bunch and then it runs away. But then you start running away from it. This goes on to a good 30 to 40 minutes before you finally get to the end, where you can now finally kill it, and the only reason you couldn't kill it sooner is because it was scripted to where you have to kill it then. I don't really like this for numerous reasons. One, it kind of conflicts with the original boss fight. If I have all of these weapons and I can kill the Gonarch, why can't I just shoot the Gonarch? And two, this is something that's not really going to be that replayable, because you know exactly what happens after the first time you beat the game. Half-Life is linear and it does have some scripted sections, but never this scripted, and I think it's a little too scripted for my liking. But I can understand why people would really like this section. It's just not something I really cared for much. I don't hate it, I just would have preferred it if it was more like the original Gonarch fight. But that would not have been anywhere near as long as they needed this section to be, so I guess I understand why they did this. Either way, that's a nitpick for me. Personally, Gonarch's Lair was one of my favorites in Half-Life 1, so I was going to be really critical of it when it comes to Black Mesa Xen. What isn't me nitpicking is how bad the entire factory section of Xen is. Have you ever thought, man, I love residue processing, I want that, but in Xen? Yeah, me neither. The factory section is just residue processing in Xen, but with an extra layer of bullshit thrown on top of it. At this point, you're given almost no ammo with any of your guns, but you do walk by some green crystals that will give you infinite ammo with your glue-on gun, so you're forced to use one weapon, which can kinda get a little bit stale. Secondly is that in this section you're mostly just fighting grunts and controllers, which can be fine, but the problem is you're fighting them in sections that are really annoying and not well suited to fighting. Take this area for example. You're stuck on 2 conveyor belts, you really don't have anywhere to go, just a bunch of open space. All these green crates house grunts in them. If you destroy them, grunts start attacking you because they pop out of them. But the controllers can also pick them up and break them. And you're stuck on these conveyor belts with nowhere to go. This is not fun. This is actually really annoying. I didn't even end up killing all the enemies here, I just kind of kept on going. And even by doing that, I had very little health. But the bigger problem is a way too long elevator section. You know those sections in games where you're sitting on an elevator, just waiting to reach the top and enemies are constantly attacking you? Those have never been fun. Why would you add that? This elevator section lasts way too long, you can't go anywhere, and during all of this, controllers are attacking you from every angle. To make things even worse, they have a section where the elevator stops, you have numerous controllers attacking you, but you can't damage them because they have shields, so you need to knock down 3 different generators so you can even hurt them. This is easier said than done because you have them constantly attacking you and they can throw explosive barrels at you, killing you instantly. After trying this for a while, I said fuck it, turned on God mode, and got past this section. This is on normal difficulty, keep in mind, and if you think it's just me, it's not just me. Afterward, I talked to 5 of my different friends, none of which talked to each other as we were playing the game, and 4 out of the 5 also turned on God mode to get by this section. Now, I wouldn't be too rough here because it's still in beta and difficulty does need to be worked out. This is something that definitely will be changed, but the bigger problem is this whole section just doesn't even need to exist. The factory section had already been going on for an extremely long time. So before you even get to here, the player's mind is already kind of dead. There's a very big pacing problem with this section. The player doesn't have any time to sit and relax and take in its surroundings, it's just constantly throwing you into more and more bullshit. To make things even worse, an elevator section goes against what Half-Life does to begin with. Half-Life is so fun because it's always pushing you forward, your sense of progression never stops. Think of the journey you take from the start of Half-Life 1 to the end. It feels like you ran across the entire country. This has really spoiled me with games, because I kind of expect this with shooters. I don't like sitting in one place for too long at this point. This is engraved into Half-Life's structure. Half-Life 2 also did the same thing. It's incredibly satisfying, and is one of the reasons why Half-Life is so successful. You could work out the elevator section to make it less difficult, but honestly, I'd still just want to skip by it. I'd be happier if it was scrapped and removed. And that's really hard to say. I know a few of the Black Mesa guys, I know they're going to be watching this, and I don't want to be too mean, but that's honestly how I feel. With that said, soon after this you reach the final boss. This final boss is so insane that I don't want to spoil anything. It feels like you've destroyed a god, and really solidifies Gordon Freeman's space as being one of the most badass characters in all of video game history. So I'm not showing any of it, but I will let you hear this.
You throwing fucking trucks at me?
What is going on? Seriously, go play this. It's entirely worth playing it. I don't want to spoil it. As a whole, Black Mesa Xen will take you around 4 to 5 hours long, which is significantly longer than the original Xen. Hell, it's half the length of the original Black Mesa game. As negative as I was to the factory chapter, that's only one chapter. Xen as a whole is astounding. I really can't complain too much. I didn't expect it to be this good or look this good. Again, it's crazy to look about how long we've been waiting for this, and now it's here, it's done. We can play Black Mesa from start to end. I never thought I would be able to say that, especially not before 2020. If you're Crowbar Collective, and I don't need to say this, you have to be damn proud of how far you've come in such a long time. Went from just modders to a full team that can rival a AAA studio. I don't know where these guys' future will be after Black Mesa, but the end seems to be coming soon. I assume that they'll have jobs pretty solidified with how much they've done. If you want to play Black Mesa, you can easily find it on Steam. It's not that expensive, although I would recommend playing Half-Life 1 first. I've always looked at Black Mesa as sort of a reimagining rather than a straight remake. A lot of the sections are clearly based on a map from Half-Life 1, but changed pretty drastically. And the overall feel with the new engine and the gunplay mechanics being different makes it feel like an entirely different game. Not in a bad way, but in a way that feels more like a counterpart to Half-Life 1 rather than a replacement for it. Both these games have their place, and Half-Life 1 holds up extremely well. In my opinion, better than Half-Life 2. So what are you waiting? If you haven't played these games, go play them. They're awesome, they're well worth the playtime. A big thanks goes to everyone that watched me stream this over on my Twitch. If you want to come follow me on Twitch and hang out, my Twitch is twitch.tv/Jarek4GamingDragon. If you subscribe on Twitch, you'll get to see my videos one day ahead of time. Same thing goes for my patrons over on patreon.com/Jarek4. Thanks all of you for watching this video. It's been one hell of a ride watching Black Mesa during this time, and I'll see you next time.